What's up, everybody? This is a Stable Lad, back to you with another video. This time we're going to talk about decentralized exchanges, also known as DEXs. You can see here, DEX. These basically are kind of like the equivalent of Coinbase or Binance, or Fidelity can sell crypto now. You've got Robinhood that can sell crypto. PayPal even, those are centralized exchanges. So CEX, where they're centralized with generally a corporation, a CEO, all that kind of stuff. Decentralized exchanges are kind of the same thing, which you can buy and sell and trade cryptos and tokens, except they're run by nobody. They are built by code and built on blockchains using smart contracts, and they run by themselves. Once a smart contract like a DEX is created or built, it technically can run forever. You can kind of use it whenever you want, and no one has to be behind it to keep it going. Although the best decentralized exchanges and the best protocols in crypto are ones that still have teams that work and develop them. And we're going to talk about a few of those today and kind of what they are, which ones I use, all that kind of good stuff. I always start on DfiLlama just to kind of take a look at things that you've got here. You can see how much volume is happening on DEXs right now. There's on the sort of major DEXs here, there's $17.36 billion traded on these DEXs in the last 24 hours. Not too shabby. The biggest DEX that we have, the biggest, most famous decentralized exchange, it was the really kind of like the big first OG in the space, is something called Uniswap. There were some others that were kind of similar to Uniswap before Uniswap came around, but Uniswap is really the first decentralized exchange that really made it incredibly easy to swap between two different assets. And then here you can kind of just see what it looks like. This is a really simple setup with a really simple user experience. You take one asset up here and you choose what that is, and then you want to swap it for another asset like USDC here. You tell it I want to swap $100 of that, and it tells you how much you're going to get on the other thing. I have an insufficient balance here because I'm just playing with the test account here that I put a test wallet on this here, so we can't really see what's in the amount, but this is how it would look. It would tell you your balance here, and then you'd press here to click to make the transaction. It costs you 41 cents on Ethereum. You can do it on different blockchains, of course. You can take like USDC here, and you can see USDC on different blockchains. You can kind of play around with that kind of stuff. Uniswap is not only cool from a swapping perspective, but as an investment perspective as well. So I use Uniswap as one of my, I use decentralized exchanges, I should say, for one of my major sort of styles of investment using stablecoins. And the great way, the reason why we can do that, which is really, really cool, is we can actually be the market makers behind this particular swap. So if you're looking at swapping USDC from USDT as a, you want to just exchange your asset, there's got to be someone behind that trade, right? So in traditional financial world, if you're on Fidelity and you want to trade one asset for another, you're looking at buyers and sellers. So if I'm a buyer of something, I need to find someone who wants to sell me that asset. With decentralized exchanges, there's nobody there. There's no buyers and sellers. What there is liquidity providers, or market makers, we call them. And that's basically me. Part of my portfolio strategy with stablecoins is market making. And so you do that by putting two different assets together in a pool, and you make every single time there's a transaction where someone is swapping from one asset to another, I'm making a little slice of the pie here. So here's one of the pools that I'm in. I've put some money in DAI and some money in USDT. These are two stable coins, and every single time that a transaction is processed through this range here, I make a small piece of that pie, and I get paid both in DAI and USDT, two stable coins that I put into this pool. And that's how it works as an investment for market making. Now, I'm just going to briefly mention here, just to kind of for people that are kind of new with decentralized exchanges, you can put up any of these pairs, and you can kind of take a look at here. So I'm going to explore, and I'm going to the pools. These are all the different pools that you can make money on by providing liquidity in Ethereum, or excuse me, in Uniswap, or in decentralized exchanges as well. But here I'm just showing you an example of Uniswap. You can do all of these pairs here, LDO and ETH. That's Lido and Ethereum. These are two different tokens. They're both incredibly volatile assets. They move up and down with the market. They move, they have their own market as well as the sort of macro market that they're in. So they have micro and macro markets, and they're volatile. They don't always stay in line with each other. And so the way these pools work is Uniswap has built into their custom smart contracts automatic price adjustments. And so in order for these things to work perfectly, when you put money into a pool, that pool needs to remain balanced. That means if ETH moves up and Lido stays the same, in this example of this pool, for example, or if ETH moves down and Lido moves up, or Lido moves up and ETH moves up, but they don't move up in tandem, that pool needs to rebalance itself immediately and all the time, constantly. And so what it does is if ETH moves up, for example, and Lido stays down, we need to rebalance that pool. So Uniswap automatically takes ETH, sells it, and purchases Lido to rebalance that pool. And that's what's called impermanent loss. You may have an asset that you put in perfect balance when you start a pool, but as the market moves up or down and Uniswap continues to rebalance those assets to keep the pool in balance, you may lose a lot of ETH, or you may lose a lot of Lido in this case. And it's called impermanent loss because it's not permanent. Eventually, both things could balance out to exactly where you put the money in to begin with in terms of its value, and you get the exact amounts back that you put in there. It only becomes a permanent loss when you actually remove money from the pool, or you remove your liquidity from that pool, and you take it at whatever balance that you have left over. Now, for our purposes, this is not super important because we're using stablecoins, and stablecoins are stable, which means they may need to be rebalanced, but that rebalancing is super tiny, right? USDC may be like $1 and 0.00135 pennies, and USDT may go down to $1 and 0.1 pennies or something like that, and you may need to rebalance it. But we're talking about micro amounts as opposed to major amounts like with two volatile assets. I'll just quickly mention too briefly that I'll just mention price oracles. Price oracles is what makes all of this work. So DeFi just can't possibly work without a price oracle. Chainlink is probably the biggest. It is the biggest price oracle, and it's a really amazing price oracle. And what it basically does is it takes real-time data in the world, exact data of all these different sort of prices, and it feeds it into every single one of the chains that it feeds it into, Aerodrome, BNB, Ethereum, Polygon, etc. And it feeds them into all these different decentralized exchanges. So we don't need to get too complicated, but basically the way it works is Uniswap will take all these real-time price feeds and they will constantly rebalance every single pool here, every single pool, so that every single one of these pools remains in balance all the time. So as a liquidity provider, you need to be aware that if you are doing any sort of volatile asset, so for example, you might have one stablecoin, USDT, and that stays stable, but ETH may go up and down, which means they're going to have to take money from USDT and put more ETH in there, or they'll take money from ETH and put more into USDT, etc., in order to keep that pool balanced. So you need to be aware, if you are a market maker, you need to be aware of what impermanent loss is. I'll do a deeper dive on impermanent loss later, but again, because my channel really only talks about stablecoins, I don't really worry too much about impermanent loss, because these generally stay pretty stable to each other. Here's USDTE and a USDT vault. This is a pool of two stable coins that stay fairly stable to each other. There will be some rebalancing, but it's fairly stable, and they're paying 26% right now. The other thing to notice and just note about Decentralized exchanges. These are not fixed rates. So if we can take a look here, it's paying 26% right now. It may not be that case. We can kind of take a look here at our monthly volume. We could take a look at price, liquidity. We could see all these things, and we could see these things kind of spike, right? And it shows us here the fees. So on July 13th, they paid something, $151 in total fees. That means there's really little going on between this in this pool on July 13th, but for some reason, the market's starting to pick up a little bit. Now you're paying $16,000 in fees. So if you're a pool provider here and you've got some percentage of this pool is liquidity that you're providing, you're sharing in this $16,000 worth of fees that's being paid. Someday you may look and this, this APR may be 4%, 3%, 2%, whatever, 1%. And some days it may be 30%. And so just something to kind of be cautious and careful of. One of the things that I like to do when I'm just like hunting for these things is I take a look down here in yields, yields here in stablecoin pools, and we can just kind of look here. We can look on Uniswap just to focus here, and we can take a look at these pools here. So we can see here on Uniswap, on the Ethereum blockchain, here's the Ethereum blockchain, Uniswap USDE, USDT, I think it was the pool that we were just looking at. It's paying right now, it says 45%. It's not really paying that. But we can see here the average, 30-day average here, at least what's being reported on DfiLlama is 27%. So that's just something to kind of look at. You can see sometimes like the hottest stuff, DAI USDT paying 14% here, but what's it paying on a 30-day basis? We look back and we can see that it's paying 13.8%. So it's fairly decent. And you just kind of like do that. The other thing I just want to kind of note real briefly is when you are looking at things on DfiLlama, always go back to Uniswap and check. You'll see that they're not always accurate. This says we're earning 45.32%. If we go back to Uniswap, let's see it pop up here. Oh, it's not telling us. I just clicked back over to this page over here. We can see that it's paying, as we looked before, 26%. That's a lot different than 45%. Okay, so DfiLlama, while it's an amazing resource, I always make sure I check with the DEX, the Decentralized Exchange as well. And you can see that in the pool here. You can see what the true APR is, and Uniswap is reporting far more accurate fees here and percentages than DfiLlama is. But I just use DfiLlama as a kind of way to sort of, help me out here. We don't really need to look at this, but you can take a look at, if you want to learn a little bit more about Uniswap, they've got tons of blogs in which you can explore here. And they've got, there's tons of education you can do here where you can take a look at how these things work. You can, if you really kind of like to nerd out on the math, you can nerd out on all the math. You can take a look at what stablecoins are. You can take a look at what automated market makers are. So a decentralized exchange is an automated market maker, right? That's basically what it is. And then it'll go down and it'll kind of tell you here this X times Y equals K market maker stuff. So you can kind of dig down into the actual math and what they've done and how they actually created these AMMs, utilizing math and cryptography and smart contracts, which is just, it's super cool if you like to nerd out about it. But if you don't want to get into the weeds about it, just know that it works automatically. And Uniswap is, for me, a grade A protocol. They've been around since the beginning. They are as battle tested as a decentralized exchange could possibly be. They continue to iterate. They continue to grow. They have Uniswap Labs that continues to build different versions. So here's, they talk about V3, V4. You have all different kinds of things that they're doing. They've expanded to, if you take a look here, they've expanded to, let's take a look at right over here. Look at all these blockchains, Ethereum, Unichain. They've even built their own blockchain called Unichain. Base, Aerodrome, Polygon, Optimism Mainnet, BNB, Avalanche, WorldChain. I mean, it just goes on through all these ones. So it's a robust grade A protocol. I use it all the time in my investment strategies. I feel safe using this. The only thing that I pay attention to is the yields they're incredibly variable. So one day you could have a hot yield, the next day it could be like practically nothing. And so I tend to kind of watch those really carefully. If I'm on Ethereum and I know that the cost of using that blockchain is higher than like a layer 2 blockchain, like one of these, like Avalanche as a layer 1, or you can use a layer 2 like Polygon, Aerodrome base. If I know I'm using Ethereum mainnet, the fees are going to be larger to use, so I just let it sit in those positions for 30 days, and I kind of test out what the average yield is. And if the average yield is healthy enough, then I'll just keep it in there for longer. If it's not, then I'll move it to a different chain. I'll move it to a different position, or I may just move it to a different blockchain like Base or Arbitrum, where I can go in and out of positions very, very cheaply and not have my APY cannibalized by all the fees that I'm paying. So there are a bunch of different competitors to Uniswap. SushiSwap is, or at least was, the biggest competitor back in the early days of what we call DeFi summer, late 2020, early 2021. And SushiSwap did something a little bit kind of scandalous to grow, but people loved the chain, loved the protocol, loved the decentralized exchange. And what they did was they took Uniswap's code. All these things are, not all of them, but most of them are open protocols. So they're open source. You can take the code and you can create your own. And people were really upset that Uniswap was not issuing their own token back in the day. The Uni token did come out, but they hadn't done it. And so what Sushi did was they're like, let's just copy over the code, build our own exchange using the same exact code, and we'll issue a token, and we'll grow by incentivizing users to use our protocol, our exchange, by utilizing and promoting our token. And that's exactly what they did. And Sushi exploded on the scene and really gave Uniswap a run for their money. Uniswap just kept their heads down. The lab team just kept their head down, kept building, kept innovating, and they really have demolished Sushi over the years. But Sushi is still a pretty cool exchange, and it's very, very similar in that you can explore the different pools here, and they've got tons of different sort of options. You can do the swapping, of course, and you can provide liquidity. One of the cool things that you can do on SushiSwap that you can't really do on too many other solutions is you can do what's called a zap. Now, take a look at this pool, this DAI USDC pool. This is on Arbitrum, it looks like, and it's paying 18.86%. There's not a ton of volume, not too much volume in this thing, but it's still paying really nicely. And you can see here the fees they're paying, $32,000. You're sharing. So if you're providing liquidity in this pool, you're sharing in quite a decent amount. This is actually a pretty nice looking, a really nice looking position here. I might even consider it for my own portfolio here. But you can see it's paying 17%. It's on the Arbitrum 1 network. And one of the cool things here is you can come over here, and with Zap mode, you can use any type of collateral you want, and it basically adds your collateral to the position. So you could take Ethereum if you have Ethereum. You could take any number of different tokens, different crypto tokens, and then by zapping it, Sushi converts it directly into DAI, right over here, DAI and USDCE, which is the kind of wrapped version on the Arbitrum blockchain. So that's kind of cool. It makes it a little bit easier. You don't have to go and say you had like ETH or even USDC. You'd have to go to something like SushiSwap or Uniswap, and you'd have to go and say, okay, I want to swap USDC for DAI or something like that to create the perfect balance to put into this pool. Instead of doing that, you'd pay a little bit extra, and SushiSwap would do it all for you in one go right here with Zap mode, which is kind of cool. Again, just another competitor to USDC, and something that I look at when I'm sort of looking at all these different options, right? So we can see here, if we wanted to go to stablecoin pools, let's readjust here. If we want to go to stablecoin pools and take a look at the APY, we're going to see a bunch of different DEXs, exchanges here. Aerodrome's another one I'll talk about. Uniswap's one here. These are not just exchanges here, but Uniswap's here. Curve is here. I'll go over that one as well. So you'll see a bunch of different Curve Exchange, Uniswap. You'll eventually see things like Sushi on here and others. And so it's just, again, one of the major ways that I make money is by providing liquidity for these pools. QuickSwap is another one. It's a pretty popular one on Polygon. I'm just going to briefly mention it here. Aerodrome is another really interesting one. Aerodrome is on Base, the Base blockchain here. You see the Base blockchain, and it has a ton of different. It's paying quite a bit, and they, if you do hold the Aerodrome token as well, you can technically kind of earn just by holding the Aerodrome token. You can actually lock it up and earn every single time somebody does transactions on the Aerodrome exchange. You can actually earn a piece of all of the transactions that are done without actually providing liquidity, if that's what you want it to do. It's been talked for years that Uniswap is going to do the same thing, that Uniswap holders will share in the profit of the protocol, because the protocol does make quite a bit of profit. But Aerodrome is doing the same thing, and it's doing it right now on the Base blockchain. PancakeSwap was one of those also really popular exchanges back in 2021, where it focused mostly on the Binance blockchain, and now it's grown from there. But they tend to have a bunch of different sort of options here, from LPing to farms and all kinds of stuff like that. PancakeSwap is another really good one. Curve is there's only really 4, in my opinion, grade A protocols in the entirety of crypto right now. And those are protocols that have, robust history, great security, the best sort of performing security audits on the chain, lots of white hacking and bug bounties, solid communities, and has been through the ups and downs and not only survived but thrived through them. And Uniswap is one of them. Aave, the lending protocol, is another. MakerDAO with their Sky protocol is another, and Curve Finance is another one for me. They had a little bit of trouble earlier I think late in 2024, but they've survived pretty much everything, and they continue to do really well. What makes Curve really cool and interesting is it is a stablecoin exchange. It focuses almost entirely on stablecoins. It has other things on there, but Curve really is a stablecoin-focused exchange. It doesn't deal with a lot of other assets outside of stablecoins. It has some BTC, as you can see here, some ETH, but as we can see here, it's got Curve USD, which is Curve's stablecoin, TriCrypto, which is, it's basically tends to be 3 assets like this 3 pool, DAI, USDC, and USDT here. But you've got all different kinds of things here, and you can see here you've got decent paying base APYs on some of these more exotic stablecoins, for example, and then you've got rewards, which are generally Curve rewards and Curve incentives, which are really, really cool. So what Curve does is they want to build up the volume and the value locked on some of their pools, and so they incentivize that with Curve rewards in order to do that. Just in kind of an honorable mention here, when you are in some of these Curve pools, what you can do is you can boost your earnings by pooling your Curve rewards together with other people. So if you have just a small amount of Curve rewards and those Curve rewards are staked, you can boost the APY that you earn. And the more Curve rewards you have that are staked, the higher your boost is. And so you can do stuff like that with things like Convex or things like Stakedao, for example. So you can come into something like Stakedao, and you can put something in here like here's a pool on Curve, USDC and USDF, for example. And maybe that Curve pool is paying you 10%, and you can boost it here, a 2.42x boost at 18.9%, for example, by putting your collateral on Stakedao and pooling it with other liquidity providers and other people that are investing in that pool with you. You could take it out anytime you want. It's completely liquid. You can put money in and out of it. You don't need to keep your money into these things. Nothing is locked or set forever, but you can boost your rewards by putting it in something like a Stakedao. Another honorable mention in a protocol that's been around since 2020 that exploded on the scene. It was kind of like it was the first crypto unicorn in terms of, DeFi unicorn. Yearn exploded on the scene in late 2020 in DeFi summer, and it was really cool. And what it did was it basically said, let's pool assets together and into Yearn vaults, and you would have professional managers basically take those funds and manage them. And so what they do is, in this, for example, I just brought up a Curve USDC, Curve USD factory. So what you would do is you'd put your money in here, and it represents a Curve factory liquidity pool. And then we earn fees from users trading in that pool, and can also deposit the LP to Curve's gauges to earn extra CRV emissions. So kind of, similarly to Stakedao, this is kind of the same, a similar kind of concept. Just make sure you kind of look over here. You've got a 10% performance fee because someone's actually actively managing these things, moving things in and out to try to get the highest APY possible. This is, hopefully this was like just a decent primer on what decentralized exchanges are. They are created so that people can swap between two different assets. And from our purposes here, and from my specific purpose here, it's a great vehicle for making money within the crypto space by providing the liquidity so that people can trade between those assets. I focus only on stablecoins because I don't want to deal with that thing that I called impermanent loss, or it's also known as IL, because impermanent loss becomes permanent. And I've lost so much money on on playing around with high APY that just didn't stand up to the losses that I took on those pools being rebalanced. So I focus only on stablecoin pools from now on, and I tend to kind of stick mostly with Uniswap, SushiSwap. So I'll stick with Uniswap. I'll do some SushiSwap here, and Curve. Every once in a while I will play with PancakeSwap because they have some pretty cool. Sometimes they have some rewards that they'll put that are pretty hefty, and I do like Aerodrome to some extent, but I haven't played with it too much. I like it because they, sometimes the rewards are pretty high on Aerodrome, but I try to stick with Uniswap because it's a grade A protocol. So for me, it's like a low risk play. If I can earn 20%, 15% on Uniswap versus 15% on Sushi versus 15% on Aerodrome, I'm going to stick it in Uniswap because I feel like the protocol is far more trusted and valuable, and it's not going anywhere. And it's withstood all the hacks and problems that we've faced over the last 5 years in crypto. So from a perspective of what I would choose, if I'm making the same percentage choice on Uniswap, that's the protocol I'm choosing. Hopefully this is a good primer on decentralized exchanges, how they kind of work roughly, and the potential APIs you can make on them, and how you make money on them. If you have questions or comments, I'd love to hear them. I'm happy to go and do deeper dives into certain aspects of decentralized exchanges if that would be helpful. And until next time, I'm the Stable Lad.
I'm the Stable Lad, and if you like today's video, please hit that subscribe button. Every week I break down what's happening in the world of stablecoins and why it matters, clearly, calmly, and without the hype. This channel is for educational purposes. It is not meant to be financial advice, so always do your own research and manage your risk wisely.